everyone, and welcome to Pod TV's #1 do-it-yourself advocate show, Timeshares, Solution or Surrender with Irene Parker. This is where we help people review their timeshare situations and determine whether there might be a solution for them, because sometimes there are, or whether they've been a victim of deceptive acts, of which then we guide them and direct them to solutions for that as well. Sometimes it's trying to recover what they've invested in timeshares that haven't been paying back. But no matter what, Irene never turns away a phone call. So if you have a problem or a concern, call the team. They are always here with Tarda. And next week, we are going to be protesting in Florida at the ARDA Convention and Awards. And I guess it's an awards ceremony. I don't know if it's for the one who sold the most deceptive timeshares, and Irene might hit me for that one. But anyway, everyone, help me welcome Irene Parker. She is on her 55th, goodness gracious, 55 episodes, and it's St. Patrick's Day.
Woo-hoo! It is. Happy St. Patrick's Day. As you're dressed appropriately today. Well, today is I'm really grateful for the show because in the last few days we found 5 court filings that are pertinent to why we want to at least talk to some people outside of it's the ARDA Spring Conference, the American Resort Development Association. And our primary concern is the harm that's being done to the military. So I'm going to introduce our first guest today is John. John is stationed in North Carolina, home of Kimberly Calhoun and Pod TV. And it's, we can talk about the 20 active duty service members that have reached out to us, but it's not the same as having someone here in the flesh to explain how this is so harmful for people who are serving our country. And we also have, we need volunteers. And so Anne had paid an exit company $14,000, and I read our report that she and I prepared after I asked her about 100 questions was about 2.5 pages. And then she showed me the report from the exit company that she paid $14,000 for. There was a couple of paragraphs that completely had nothing to do with the complaint, and I was shocked. So we're hoping she's interacting with them to see if she can be refunded. And my co-founder of TARDA, we had 5 of us founded TARDA. In addition to Sheila as being a founding board member, we have 10 people on our board. And we have Lori, and Anne's got some things she needs to clear up, and then she's willing to come on our board. But our other founding board member is Brandon, a Navy veteran, and he built our first website for us. And John, I understand you have some expertise in that area, so we might be tapping into you for some of that expertise. And usually my opening comments are pretty short, but with these 5 lawsuits, they are so pertinent to why we want to talk to some people at the ARDA conference which is March 24th to 26th. And the active duty service members that I talked to have just been as shocked as I am that Westgate Resorts is sponsoring the guest speaker, Paul Whelan, who is the Marine who was released from a Russian prison. Now, under normal circumstances, that would be okay, but surely Mr. Whelan is not aware of the thousands of active duty service members and veterans, because many veterans keep their security clearance post-service to work in military-related capacity. But to understand this, we have to go back and look at the 5 lawsuits that have been filed, because they're all related to this. And I've asked Ann and Sheila and you, John, and Kimberly, if I start going into the rabbit holes and it starts not making any sense, let me know. The background for this and why these pertain is the first lawsuit to be filed was Lewis versus Blue Green. And yes, Lewis versus Blue Green. And the military plaintiffs received a negative ruling because the judge said that they could not tie their damages to the Military Lending Act. The second lawsuit filed was Steins versus Westgate. And the argument for the Military Lending Act and why it's so important is the Military Lending Act exempts home mortgages. And so the argument was whether a timeshare stay is a residential stay or more a transient stay like a hotel. The judge ended the day by saying, when I check out of a timeshare, I can't leave my underwear and toothpaste. So Westgate appealed. They lost at the appellate court, which means that Jonathan, if he had purchased from Westgate, is a covered borrower and his contract should be void from inception. Well, you would think, well, there it is, we're done. No, courts, it just seems, I don't think I could be a lawyer. It just doesn't seem logical sometimes, but that law firm likely has to go back to the lower court and request to certify class. Anyone that bought from 2018 forward, defining members of the class, people have an option to opt out of a class action if they wish to. So the third lawsuit filed was Lingard versus Holiday Inn. That family had purchased 7 times. At the first 6 purchases, they were told, well, since you're military, you can easily sell your timeshare. By the 7th purchase, I think one of the loans was $75,000, one was $35,000, and it was becoming unaffordable. And they went to a presentation to find out how to sell, and they said, I'm sorry, that wasn't accurate. But if you get a new contract for more money, we will be able to consolidate your contracts, and you will have lower payments, which they did, and it didn't lower payments. So in that lawsuit, the courts recently I just discovered this a few days ago. The courts ruled that they do not want to certify, they will not allow class certification because some of the plaintiffs and some of the potential class members use their timeshares, use some of their points, use some of what they paid $35,000, $50,000 for, which seems extremely unfair and biased for the industry. And so the law firm has filed a motion for reconsideration. The other court filing we have, and I spoke to the attorney that was involved, and he asked me not to use their name, even though it's public record. I'm sure the family is devastated. This was the timeshare law firm, also known as the Abrams firm. John Abrams is the primary attorney on that. And they made a $38,000 purchase. And because he filed first in court, which they're going to compel arbitration, so why he didn't just first go to arbitration, which is why it's public record that after a $38,000 purchase, they made 2 prior purchases. The judgment against them, the award Wyndham gets is $91,207. And the affidavit that the mom and dad both signed is the presentation started at 7 a.m. They had a young child, probably, I would think, 10 to 12, that you wouldn't mind saying, why don't you stay in the room? You can sleep. And they said it's a short, more than an hour, 90 minutes. Well, at 8:30, she was worried about her child. and they said, well, in order to go see him, you have to sign these documents. So not knowing she was buying anything, she signed those documents, and she went back to the room, and she was locked out of the room, and the child was locked in. So she went back to the presentation center, and they said, oh, your husband has to sign documents before we can unlock the door. Well, talk about a hostage situation. So that, and okay, thank you for that, Kim. That's our protest. So they confirmed the arbitration because they did not seek to vacate within 3 months. And there was another one, Wyndham as well, where they're ordered to pay $47,000. Now, the reason that's important is it is about arbitration. The Military Lending Act exempts arbitration. And so the same law firm, the timeshare law firm, the Abrams firm, Smith versus Westgate has filed a motion for sanctions, saying that there are 60 lawsuits filed, and the one in particular here is time barred. So they bought in 2016, the statute of limitations in Florida is 6 or 7 years. And they called his lawsuits cookie cutter, which I was reading several of them. They might be in Tennessee or Florida or South Carolina or something, but it did look cookie cutter, but it's the pot calling the kettle black, because you could call our complaints cookie cutter because everybody's saying the same thing, whether it's Wyndham or Blue Green or Westgate. And we had active duty Air Force National Guard, Andrew, on the show 2 or 3 times, where you're told that if you buy more points or you upgrade, or in his case, he was, for a young couple with a 6-year-old, sold a 4-bedroom as a rental investment. And when it doesn't work, he's forced to default. And that was not the only factor, but it played a primary factor in his involuntarily being separated from service, because he was transferring from the Idaho National Guard to the Utah National Guard, which meant a new security clearance review. Now, why lawmakers don't seem to be concerned, we haven't gotten in front of them, Kim. We keep talking about how to do that, but even the developers, how they could be so unconcerned about the harm doing to the military, while one of the 20 people, active duty service members that reached out to us in Hawaii, he's in default, sold. He said he was promised that he could rent it, and he's with the Army. He purchased from Wyndham at an Army Wyndham co-sponsored military spouse day. I mean, you can't make this up. So that's a little more long-winded. Anybody let me know if that didn't make sense. And Jonathan, if you could start by telling us, you've served 13 years? Jonathan?
John?
Okay, sorry, I was on another tab because I wanted to make sure I have some of my contract stuff up just for, quick reference.
Yeah,
I spent 13 years in the Army, active duty. I've had different jobs, of course, but now I'm a warrant officer in the United States Army, again, stationed here at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and it has been a journey dealing with this.
Yes.
And you were deployed overseas?
So yeah, in 2015, the ending of 2014, October, to the beginning of 2015, somewhere around there, we deployed to Iraq. And since then, there was a bunch of issues that I dealt with. We had a bunch of burn pits that they dealt with out there, and because of that, I ended up with a bunch of particles in my lungs. There's nothing that they can do about it. It's just one of those things that I either have to train around or deal with, which is frustrating. But I am on the burn pit registry. I did do what I had to make sure that I take care of myself as best as I can. But of course, I mean, serving my country for 13 years, you would think, oh, he's just going for retirement, but it's more than that. It's, serving my country, serving with the soldiers that I've dealt with over the last 13 years. I want to make everything better. So it's frustrating to be in a position in which you're taken advantage of, but I've given so much already.
Has the VA been supportive?
So unfortunately, the VA won't do anything with me, but they have been supportive with my wife, because my wife was also in the service for 10 years and she medically retired from the Army. Of course, a bunch of issues that she had to deal with as well.
And why is the VA not supporting your medical issues?
So Veterans Affairs can support certain aspects, but I'm still active duty. So a lot of that still has to go through.
Oh, yeah, you're not a veteran.
Yeah. Even
I
though,
understand.
yeah.
Yeah, well, in 2016, I started this, and I think it was that year, maybe 2017 at the latest, a 26-year-old veteran reached out. I think it was Army, and he had blood cancer, having served, he was by a burn pit in Basra. So when you have to be battling this timeshare on top of these other things, and I said last week that a Navy commander reached out and she was able to, even though the dispute was from 2017, she was able to resolve it. And she called me, she said, "I'm shaking." I mean, it's not every day you make a Navy commander shake. Because of a timeshare, a product that's supposed to bring joy and fun and relaxation. Do you have kids?
I do. I have 2 kids.
You can, okay, so this was to vacation with the kids. Tell us what you bought, where were you, when you bought it, and when did things seem to not be going the way you thought they were going to go?
So to start with the entire story, again, my wife and I, we've been in for X amount of years, and in 2023 we decided, hey, my wife is already out of the Army. Let's do something as a family. So we decided to go to Florida in order to enjoy some time. She's from Florida. I became a Florida resident because I'm married to her. I was like, sure, let's go have some fun. We initially went to Universal Studios out of Orlando, and while we were there, we were reached out. I can't remember if it was by the phone, an email, or something, where they said, hey, you're going to get X, Y, and Z if you just sit through a presentation. I fully committed to, if we do this, I don't care what you're selling me. I would like to just take the money and go. That's not how.
Wait a minute. I'm going to be interrupting. So who called you? Was it
Sheraton Vistana,
okay.
now owned by Marriott, but they're the ones who reached out offering to sit through a conference, and I can't remember the exact offer that they made, but whatever it was enticing enough for my wife and I to sit down and be like, okay, we'll listen to what they got to say and we'll go.
But were you staying at their resort?
No.
Okay, so, but were you staying at a Marriott or a Sheraton?
Yeah, we're staying at a Marriott.
Okay, so the Marriott check-in, or they called you and they said, now, did they ever say it was a timeshare you would be hearing about?
I don't recall if they said specifically it's a timeshare. I think they called it a VOI, vacation owner interest or vacation of interest, something like that. So initially I wasn't under the impression that this was just going to be a timeshare sales pitch. And
that's very common at Marriott Bonvoy, Hilton Honors. You've been a loyal member for years and years, and they'll call you and say, oh, would you like to hear more about how to vacation more and save money? I mean, imagine a product so bad they can't tell you what it is.
Exactly. And
okay,
then also, when you think about it, they try to sugarcoat it all, but they're not really sharing it as a timeshare, because of course, when I think timeshare, being born in the 90s, I think, oh, in Aspen, you get this log cabin, just as an example, but you don't get any property. You don't get anything. You get, and we mentioned it earlier, you get points for a vacation of interest. That's not the same thing. And then to go through the entire thing, we sat there, we were told it was the same thing. It's going to be 90 minutes. We sat there, we listened. And my first thing, doesn't matter if it's buying a car, buying a house, or buying anything, I elected to go discuss it and leave and discuss this with my wife. They would not let us go. And it became very frustrating because one of the things that they wanted from me was like an ID card to verify who I am. And I told them, I said, I have my military ID card. Do you need my Florida resident card? And they took my military ID card and wouldn't give it back. And it became frustrating because, again, even after presenting all of this information to them, they neglect to admit any fault or any wrongdoing, because in their eyes, we never did any of that stuff. And that becomes very frustrating.
Well, and the problem is, I started with these adverse arbitration awards, is the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And some people think an attorney is a magic bullet. We refer to attorneys. Not everyone has the time and temperament to self-advocate. But here you have someone that retained an attorney and they're facing a $91,000 judgment. They would have been better off just defaulting. So tell us what you purchased. How many points do you remember?
So approximately $20,000 is what the entire loan cost. And then this is why I wanted to pull it up just to make sure. We were offered 15,000, I believe, in points, or 150,000 points to use over X amount of time. But as I've learned the hard way, I wasn't able to look at anything, view anything, not even in the middle of this brief. They waited till a few weeks later to finally show me everything.
Did you get a copy of the contract when you signed?
I have it pulled up.
But did they give you a hard copy of the contract when you signed?
Oh, absolutely. So they gave me a hard copy of the contract at the very end when I had to sign stuff. And by that point, it had already been about 2 hours. My wife and I were ready to go. We had already asked them to go. We had a gentleman pacing behind us the entire time. So even if I wanted to get up and go, he was already standing there. I'm not leaving with my ID card. That's another thing. But there was just a bunch of compiling factors that made me, okay, cool. Sure, we're going to acknowledge we're agreeing to this. And I fully plan on not staying with this. But then going into so 51,700 star options is what they called it, with some incentives, and then they provided the list of, hey, your annual maintenance assessment, your club dues, etc.
And what was the interest rate, and how much did you finance?
So the financing was approximately 20,000. It was 19,734, if I remember.
19%.
No. So the percentage is 13.99 according to them. It's 14%. This entire process made me very frustrated. And when I reached out to the company, Sheraton Vistana, I said, hey, none of this lines up, and I would like to, invoke my rights under the MLA, because this doesn't line up with what my rights are covered under that MLA. They claimed in the beginning, well, they weren't obliged to give me certain documents, that the closing document would suffice. But then again, I did a bunch of research of my own, and I was very frustrated when this started. And I found out they didn't add the maintenance fees and club dues on the closing disclosure, which would, of course, raise what that annual percentage rate would be, which, of course, that in itself should be, well, you didn't fully give me the picture on my closing disclosure. Therefore, the annual percentage rate would be higher. Therefore, this document is not valid. And they continue to argue. So they say it's 14%, but again, with the over $1,000 in maintenance fees and the $250 club dues, that's more than the 14%. I don't know the exact number because I don't have the calculator pulled up, but it's still below the 36%, but it was above the 20% threshold, which is what we were anticipating. And even then, again, it's a document that you didn't provide all the information on.
Well, and there's an APR and there's an MAPR.
Yes.
So the military annual percentage rate needs to include those costs. And we have an active duty Air Force where the maintenance fees are double what he thought they were going to be, $2,000. So he wasn't able to pay those. He had told that they would be no more than $1,000. So he's paying $600 a month for nothing. He submitted his report to Blue Green, and they offered to reduce it to 6% because the Service Members Civil Relief Act requires if you have a high interest rate loan before you enter service, you can reduce it to 6%. The lender's required to reduce it. So, why is he a covered borrower for that, but he's not a covered borrower under the Military Lending Act? It doesn't make any sense. So what made you, there are many people, we've had Sherida, our other board member, on the show many times. She's been, she works in Marriott resales and rentals. I worked in it briefly, but I have too many people like yourself calling for me to do that. But, typically Marriott has been a cut above the other developers. They have far less BBB complaints. There are many people that really like Marriott. Was it specifically your military lifestyle that made it not usable for your family?
So that's the biggest part for me. The way the briefer, and I can't remember her name, sold it was the company will work around my schedule, because initially they said you need to book a year out. That doesn't work for me. I'm in the United States Army. I could deploy next week, which has happened before. It's how I ended up in my first deployment. But I don't know what the future holds. We can try to plan around that, but what happens when I schedule this and then, something came up, I can't do this anymore. Now I have to wait another year to reschedule. And I was assured, and of course this goes back into the oral agreements, but I was assured that they would be willing to work with me. And that's not the case. My service, being in the Army, doesn't allow me to just willy-nilly go on vacation as much as I can.
Yes.
Yes.
And
this is important for those of you who manage to buy something that has absolutely no value whatsoever of what they sold you at the price they sold you. I learned this from our mutual friend, Lynn. Value of consideration. Write these words down, please. And when you speak with these people, you make sure you use this term. This term is very key legally for some people to get out of situations like this. But there's no value of consideration if you bought something and you can't use it, or it's never available to use because they oversell it. But one of the biggest wrongs that they do, and you all can go out and do this homework because Lynn made me do it, is you go out to book something on their site, right? Now, I don't know who you use, but you go out and book something on their site a week that you want, and you find it. And it may say it's not available, but you highlight it, take a picture of it, and set it aside. Then go as a non-member to that same place and try to book it, the same week. Odds are it's going to be available. I will bet you it will be cheaper, or a fraction of the cost of what your membership was going to charge you, because Lynn and I did this a few times on my site, and it was every single time. Not once, not twice, but everything we tried to book, different times and everything. The value of consideration was no longer there, because it was better for me to be a non-member and utilize the services than it was to be a member. So,
but that's not all the time. Like both Ann and Sheila have owned timeshares for years and years. Anna's disputing Hilton, but you've been fairly happy with Holiday Inn, and I've been a member since. So many times it's not more expensive. But what we're lobbying for, John, and you can help us with this by reaching out to your inspector generals in the Army, is they always say you should have read your contract. Like there's a Wall Street Journal economic analysis we want everyone to post their comment on, and someone posted, there's a sucker born every minute. And I said, number one, in the case of John, what we're lobbying for, and when we want to get a lawmaker to propose a bill, is reading the contract would not have helped John, because you don't have access to the booking site during the contract rescission period to know that he had to customarily book 10 or 11 months out. And so that alone, and then the other thing we're lobbying for is the oral representation clause should be disclosed at or prior to the presentation. If you get an appointment card or an email, all they have to do is put at the bottom, do not rely on oral representations to make a decision to purchase. That clause is in other contracts when you buy a credit card or open a credit card, but in this, we've had attorney Mike Finn on the show, quoted in the New York Times, as saying that's a license to lie clause. And the other thing is, reading the contract, availability is not part of the contract. They might give you a beautiful booklet of what the average is, but that doesn't include supplier demand. Jonathan, other than the flexibility of booking, was there anything else that you found didn't own up to what the salesperson had told you?
Again, there were a few things. Again, with that oral representation, your star options won't expire. You won't have to worry about that. Again, the availability. Trying to think off the top of my head. Nothing else that I can think of that.
Well, you can save your points from 1 year to the next. So if you can't vacation 1 year, you can wait, and you can borrow from the future year. 1 year ahead, you can borrow. Is that what you're referring to about not being able to expire?
Yes. So
okay.
all of my points would roll over. That's the word that they used.
Just for 1 year, or you could roll them?
They did not specify. You tell me my points roll over, I'm going to think back to when I was a kid and I had the cell phone where you had to buy the cards to put minutes on there. When those roll over, It doesn't matter how many months I didn't buy a card, I still have those. So that was my understanding. And again, they don't explain to you, hey, it only rolls over from 1 year into the next. After that, the initial year, no longer available. They don't explain that to you. But a part of that also goes into, yes, read your contracts. I learned that again the hard way, but also they don't give you the time to read the contract while you're there because, of course, they want to rush you through to get to the next victim. But also, there's a lot of rights that people don't know about going into these things. So, for example, I am a covered borrower under the Military Lending Act. Do you think I knew about the Military Lending Act until I had to fight these people over what my rights were? No, I didn't, because that's not something that's common knowledge. You can ask any soldier, pick a random soldier in the Army or any branch of service and say, do you know what the Military Lending Act is? They won't be able to tell you. Most of them wouldn't be able to tell you what SCRA is. And that's something they should know. But it's a lack of knowledge that also is being victimized, because they know that most service members don't know this information. So even if I read the contract and I'm like, okay, well, I don't like this. Can we change this? Can we do this? I still wouldn't have known. MLA prohibits mandatory arbitration, or MLA says that you need to give me this document, which you didn't provide. I would have never known that.
Yeah, it's really, and we had a recent complaint where she was pregnant when they attended the presentation, and they said, we don't want a vacation until our child is like 3 or 4 years old. We don't want a vacation with an infant. And so they were told they could roll over. And so they're thinking they'll roll over until the child is 4 years old and then take a really great, summertime vacation. And that's why when it comes to the military, it's just too much of a slippery slope. And so what what would be fair would be the rescission period would start the day you had access to the booking site. You would have been able to go on and attempt to book something and see that you have to book pretty far out. Now, I've always booked, now it's a different resort. We have Diamond Points. I've been able to book 60 days or less, no problem. And Sheila, you've owned more timeshares for longer than I have, I think. Well, maybe not. I started in 1984. How would you respond to the value you've gotten out of, right now we're dealing with Club Exploria with you, but you've owned 2 other ones. How would you respond to Jonathan? John?
Well, we first bought in 1995, and we bought in Virginia, in Williamsburg, because I am from Virginia and my whole family was down there. For many years, we always found we had very good value in the company that we had. And back at that time, it was Powhatan Plantation. And then the other ones bought into it, took over. And it wasn't until 2016 that we had issues. And we found a snake and he just gave up, and I went back to him several times and he just lied to us. And the division for the DBPR,
DPPR, yeah.
yes, they agreed with me and they thought this company should have given me my money back until they talked to this company's attorneys. And then they believed the attorneys. So,
Well, yeah, you have to stop there though, because you had what they call a pencil pitch.
I
And
did.
they're so skilled, they write upside down.
Yeah,
And we had 5 of this agent's pencil pitches from 5 different buyers. And at first, the Attorney General's office was really on your side. And then after talking to the attorney, even though you had proof, I still remember the numbers. 9870 minus 9870
yes,
is 0, meaning you
yep,
would have no maintenance fees on 5 different pencil pitches. And the comment was, we don't know if they gave that to you or if you took it because evidence obtained illegally is inadmissible.
yeah.
Yeah, that only took 3 years to resolve that,
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And we took a
So,
beating on it.
yeah, exactly. And Anne, you've been you're battling Hilton right now, and you're a little bit similar to John in that you were what you were hoping for wasn't what you got. So you've been listening, you've been sitting, listening to several of my calls. What have you gleaned from listening to, you've probably listened to maybe 10 different families. How are you feeling about this? Oh,
How do I feel? I feel angry. And when I hear people and what they go through, it makes me sick. I mean, I feel okay. Yeah. I felt stupid actually when I contacted you because being on pod TV is not my thing. But anyway, every time I listen in a call, I learn so much from you, and it's like, oh my gosh, then I go to an exit company and get more, they get more money. So I just want to help. I want it stopped. I want the timeshare company stopped. Yes, when I had Holiday Inn, we could go anywhere, anytime we wanted. It wasn't a big deal. My whole thing with Hilton, I just wanted to go the first week of the year. And that was my birthday. And that's the only time we would go to Hawaii, the only time. And they said, oh, no problem, no problem. We kept upgrading our points because we didn't have enough. And the final upgrade, we said, to be sure, we want to go to Maui in Hawaii on my birthday. The first week is a holiday period. And no problem, no problem, it'll be fine. Well, that didn't help. Yeah, we couldn't reserve a spot because it's a high, during the holidays, it's a high time. So they said, oh, no, we can't, I would never have gotten it. I mean, I would never have gotten the first week of the year. So,
well, I think it's really important to go over, since Kim and not only Kim and myself and Sheila, but we had a few weeks on Tom Gwynn, who served 23 years with the Baltimore Police Department. And he bought points over 20 years, probably $150,000 worth of points, and was told that you should buy more points to rent, another one of those cookie cutter complaints. And he reached out to the person he was referred to by the Wyndham sales agent, and it did work. He was able to offset about 30% of his costs, and then they sent him a cease and desist letter accusing him of commercial activity, which he was left with so many points that he had to default. A 20-year valued customer, they're treating like that. And when did you stop making payments? You went ahead and defaulted, correct?
That's correct. May or June of
Of
2024.
2024. And have you been getting a lot of collection calls?
Well, not really. We got the letter, the default letter that they were gonna, sell it, and we had so much time to pay them back. But really, we only got, we really didn't get any collection calls. It hit my credit report, but
Wow.
we really didn't get any collection calls.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
you know, they a lot of attention is put on the elderly on that Wall Street Journal economic analysis, that people are saying, you know, well, I'm glad I'm not a baby boomer and fell for this. And I said, you know, there's an elder abuse hotline. There needs to be a younger abuse hotline, because us old folks are set. Our mortgages are paid off. We pay cash for our cars. It's the younger people, that includes the military, that are having problems buying a house, buying a car. It affects your employment. And we have had some active duty service members default. And we've had a few people that are experts in this that have said, if you are in the military and you plan to default, you should go talk to whoever that would be, whether it would be JAG or what is it, in the Army, IS2 officer?
RS2, yeah.
Yeah, RS2 officer. And what we do is we provide the information from the court filings from the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals that says, look, you know, we really should be a covered borrower of this contract. So there have been people that have defaulted, but you know, you don't want to roll the dice with it. Here's what, though, the American Resort Development Association this is the anti-consumer legislation. ARDA and ARDA Rock, Resort Owners Coalition, that is purported to be the owners' advocacy group. In 2010, ARDA was fined for not calling donations voluntary. And so what do? They bury it now. Not all developers, but in our case, when we went to pay our maintenance fees, it wasn't there, and it's opt out. So you have to call them to remove it. Now, Sheridan, I believe, is opt in. Marriott is opt in. But Wyndham and Blue Green and Diamond, and they raise $5 million a year. Now, in 2015, in the Villages of Florida, there was a group that was very pro timeshare, and they wrote a pretty scathing article in Red Week about 2015 legislation. They made it more difficult to be released from a timeshare based on, quote, non-material errors. Well, non-material to who? They would say John's an error because, you know, just not having to be able to book 11 months out. That's material to you. It may not be material to the timeshare company. And the worst was in Arizona in 2019, State Representative Shauna Bollock proposed a bill that would have allowed a timeshare buyer 24 hours to consider their purchase. You know, you have to buy today. You have to buy today. And that bill passed 100% in the House. And then it went to the Senate, and the ARDA lobbyists stood up and said, it's not the state's responsibility to protect people who don't take the time to understand the product. Which, you know, we raise People are paying them $5 million a year and have no clue who they are. And so that it was failed in the Senate. And then in North Carolina, one of the ARDA board members applauded North Carolina because timeshare sales agents don't need a real estate license anymore. How is that protecting consumers? And there's this was formerly the Broward Bulldog, now it's the Florida Bulldog, I think. They reported, and even though this is a long time ago, this hasn't changed. This was in the same article about being fined for not calling by the federal election commission for not calling donations voluntary. From 2006 to 2010, ARDA spent over $1.1 million retaining Washington, D.C. lobbyists to argue against greater timeshare truth and lending disclosure, to oppose such things as mortgage reform legislation, including the expansion of truth and lending requirements to timeshare buyers. And one person was telling me that at the last ARDA conference, the person at ARDA that usually answers the phone was bragging about how she had the Speaker of the House, his number on her phone, and she could call him at any time. Now, Kim and I are, begging at the door to talk to Elizabeth Warren and a few other people, but it costs $100,000 a year to lobby at the federal level and $10,000 to $12,000 per month per state. So people will post on Facebook, well, write your congressman. We need people to write your congressman. It's not going to do any good. But then Kim and we met someone on the train coming back from Delaware court that does have lobby experience, and surely you can get to a lawmaker without having $100,000 and $10,000 to $12,000 per month in your pocket to ask them to propose a bill.
That's not how it works. Elizabeth Warren would probably be our main resource to be able to knock this wall down. Something else I want to bring up, Irene, that just irritates the mess out of me is I heard John mention this, and I've heard so many other people mention this, that they take their driver's license or their military ID from them and they hold it. And I'm to the point that should just be illegal at this point in time, that nobody should take your ID in a meeting and hold it until they want to give it back to you. At this point, I want to give an advisory. Everyone has a phone now. Take a picture, baby. You ain't touching it. Do not let anyone touch your IDs at all. And the reason is that the biggest scams nowadays is taking your ID and scanning it and using it for other things. So I don't trust Hilton. I don't trust any of them. I mean, when they ask me at the counter, can you show us your ID? They don't take it from me. I hold it. Right? When I'm checking in, because I was paying attention this road trip because this has been bothering me. So when I get there, I just show it to them. They don't take it from me. I give my credit card, scan it, please. You tap your card now. You don't hand your card to anybody. So I think it should be illegal this day and time for anyone to take and walk away with it. Because to me, they can scan it and use it against you. So please just, I think that should be illegal.
If you can get on an airplane and just show them your ID, it doesn't make any sense that you can't go to a timeshare presentation.
You don't have to do that anymore. Now you have to show your ticket and they scan your face, and it's your eyes that they're getting. John, you know about this. But it's the eyes that they have been scanning for years and years and years. I was part of that program many years ago where they were working on that. But it's so they do ID, but I hope they don't do my face ID because they always get me confused with Hillary Clinton. I don't know why or how. But the military, the FBI, every time they ran my face, and they did a comparison. It always pulled up Hillary, and they'd look at me, and I'm like, it's my sister.
You know,
What can I
you
say?
know what's funny is the very first person I talked to about this was an activity director at a timeshare in Sedona.
Yeah.
And I talked to him about this. Well, first of all, I talked to him when Diamond bought the ILX resort, and he was saying, "Oh, it's this Diamond Resort. It's really a great company." I'm like, "Oh, well, good. I'm looking forward to hearing about him." And then, so that was 2012. We actually bought points. I came back in 2015, and I said, there's something really wrong here. And our, we were told they were adding New York properties. And we have a daughter in New York, so we bought only for that reason, just like you, Anne. And then when I went to book it, it would have cost $10,000 using my points compared to $3,000 booked online. Never was the word affiliate mentioned in the contract. And it made sense. If I was happy with my value, I had no problem with value. They're adding properties. There's no reason for me to think that's going to be. But it was, they didn't own it and manage it. They only had kind of a middleman for it. So I went back and I talked to him in 2016 when I was going to be on Fox Property Man with the attorney Bob Massey, and I told him, I said, I really think we need to get an organization to. I didn't blame the sales agent. He might not have known that, but when I filed a complaint with first the Arizona Attorney General, Florida Attorney General, New York Attorney General, the answer from the attorney in Arizona, Diamond's attorney, was, well, this is all the time she's used her points in the past. That has nothing to do with it, just like with Anne. And so I went back to him and I said, I told him about that. And he said, I think that that's a good idea because you look like Elizabeth Warren. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I went and got new glasses.
Yeah, right. You look nothing like her whatsoever. Nothing. But
Maybe
here's
back
the thing.
then.
I want to make people aware of how dangerous this is because I do work in cybersecurity sometimes by night. Kind of like Superman, right? Journalist by day and I fight crime by night. And we actually busted a few people recently with the police. I'm real happy about that. But here's something that's very concerning to me. When I went through all of that stuff because I was completely drunk and they had my credit card, they opened up a credit card in my name. God knows everything, right? And a year later, they started just charging my credit card $200. No authorization, no notice to me. Then they put it back. Oops. Then they charged another one and then they put it back. And they were back. I bet they should have had no authority. And this is when I was like, I had it. I'm calling the state attorney general. They should have had never a year later touched any of my credit cards without any authorization, any signature from me. But that's what they do. And if you're like some people, you're really busy, you might not catch it. You might, okay, yeah, maybe I made a payment through there instead of so.
But are you sure in your paperwork that you didn't somewhere inadvertently agree to it?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the one credit card was used to make, I guess, the first part of the purchase, and then they opened up another credit card in my name and used that. So, and then they opened up a mortgage in my name, so or whatever you call it. But the end of the day, a year later, they should have no right to use any of that for any payments at all because I was making payments on my mortgages. Like I was making, it was all going there. No, it was just a $200 thing. And then they put it back. And then they did my other credit card and did I think it was like 366 or something stupid like that. So, I mean, it was annoying because it's like, they have no authority whatsoever to touch your credit card. Those contracts don't even give them that authority. I mean, unless you set up your payment to be with that credit card, my payments were not set up for that. So no, it was somebody in their system, somebody in their company, and they were just probably taking money out of people's credit cards.
Well, John mentioned about not having time to read the contract.
Yeah.
The answer to that is you had 10 days to cancel in Florida. But one of the legislations that are recently passed not this current, in 2023, all documents are to be provided electronically. Now, so you signed on a tablet, did you, John? Okay, so if you buy a house,
I signed an actual physical paper.
you did. Okay, well, it's very common to sign on a tablet, and it's hard to read. They'll just say, do your initial, and then we tap it the rest of the way. But when you buy a house, you're not going to sign. You can go home and you can review it on your computer. But one common complaint is that contract will be. It used to be on a CD. Okay, so Westgate, the common complaint was there was a compartment for a CD, but it wasn't in it. And so you had to go to this zipper where it was like hidden. The complaints with Wyndham is you're given a flash drive and it's not on the flash drive.
Yep.
And then try while you're on vacation. Yeah, just like looks like a credit card, but it's a flash drive. Try when you're on vacation to get a copy of that
You don't have
contract.
a computer, right? You don't have
Yeah.
a computer with you because you're on vacation.
Or
So-
trying to go back to the sales center and say, I want a, they'll say, well, contact the corporate office, or they'll say, well, we'll mail it to you. So then that's after the contract rescission period that you get it. So, but
the difference between timeshares and real mortgages, though they say timeshares and mortgage, is mortgage people, the brokers and everything, they're all accountable for anything you are told. Oral representation is just as important in that contract as the contract itself. They'll go to jail if they misrepresent. But timeshares are not accountable for anything that they represent or actually, what I've learned is they're really not accountable for the closing at all. They'll have an attorney there and let you sign it drunk. So, and we've got a recording of somebody telling them one time.
We have a 30-minute recording.
Hear it. I've had
Yeah.
so much to drink today. So they sit there and they talk to this person for 2.5 hours. We have the full recording. I'm sorry, but I've just drank too much. And the guy goes, that's okay. We'll just keep talking to you till you sober up.
Well, and we have the Marine that has on a recording the Wyndham sales agent, promising him a 4% interest rate because of the GI Bill.
Yeah.
And that's on a recording, and he's still not resolved from his dispute. Because they're like, what are you going to do? Sue us? You can't. Go ahead, take us to arbitration, see what happens.
From point of sale to getting out, there is no getting out even when you die. You have to be able to file some paperwork after you die to say that your family doesn't inherit your debt.
No. Your heir was
Yeah,
file
but
a
your heir
disclaimer.
has to know about it, and most
Exactly.
of them don't know about it. So
Yeah.
that's a scam in itself. But on top of that, getting out of it, the exit companies are a bigger scam, and we've got people that we have spoke with lost thousands, tens of thousands of dollars trying to get out and don't. But exit companies do not guarantee you a refund. They just get you out of the contract, and they're charging you based on how much you owe. Okay, you don't. I've figured this part out, the formula. So it's different for everyone. They always say that it's different for everyone. So just avoid all of that. It's illegal to do that, to me, to charge somebody for something like that, and then do no guarantee for them. And I think
we're down to our last minute, Kim. I just want to make sure I want to thank
St.
Ann
Patrick's
and
Day.
Sheila, and on behalf of all of our armed services, John, thank you so much for being on today. It meant a lot to a lot of people.
Also, just want to remind everyone from March 23rd to March 22nd, 6th, we will be protesting down in Orlando, Florida at the ARDA convention and awards celebration for the most deceptive acts. Maybe that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have an award to hand one of
Yeah.
them, and we will vote who has the most. But, people, we have to unite together to stand together to fight this. What they're doing to the military is super wrong because they served us and they shouldn't have to be served such a bad deal and lied to as much as they are. I mean, that's got to hurt. And let's just unite together, work together, and we'll see you next Monday at the reception in Orlando.
Wish you could be there, John.
Get on your fighting gloves. Irene, I need, make sure you put some money aside for my bell.
Oh, I already promised my attorney.
Everyone take care. I'm going to show you a little ad
Happy-
for our protest, and then we're out. Take
Okay.
care. Stay healthy, stay wealthy.
Army, oh, the Marine Corps, then here for the Coast Guard, Navy and the Air Force. Hey, now all the men and women, you take up the fight.
Very
There you
good.
go.
Yeah, very nice.
Let's take up the fight.
Okay, Sheila.